Welcome to the Midlife Leap, a lifestyle talk show for women in midlife. I'm your host, Sanita Johnson, and I am excited to share tips and interviews on topics ranging from business, career, current news, fashion, shopping, health, travel, and so much more. And because I'm known as the Midlife Leap Coach, from time to time, I'll share some of my Midlife Leap coaching tips. So come on, ladies, let's reignite and reimagine our Midlife Leap journey together. Are you looking for a remote job? You'll need to update your resume and LinkedIn profile to demonstrate your remote work capabilities. It's not enough just to show that you are a hard worker and talented, because recruiters want to hear that you can be collaborative and productive remotely. Here are a few simple remote relevant updates that you can include. Share your time management skills and your ability to complete tasks without constant supervision. Show your ability to learn quickly. And demonstrate tech skills with tools that are often used for hybrid and remote work, such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Salesforce, Basecamp, Slack, or any other business communication platforms. Now, if you have any entrepreneur experience, whether you're selling t-shirts on Amazon or used books on eBay, share it, because it's evidence that you are a self-starter, able to work independently, and you set goals, because entrepreneurs are goal setters. Share that information. Do you happen to have a private home office? That's great. That's an advantage for employers who are concerned about the kids or the pets interrupting your workflow. And you can include that information about your home office as part of your job description, or create a facility section to describe your office and the different tools that you have. Because if you have studio podcasting equipment, that's great for your Zoom calls. Do you have filing cabinets, a copier? Share that information. So one thing is for certain, remote work is much more competitive now that it's a permanent part of our work structure. So updating your resume and your LinkedIn profile to demonstrate your remote work savviness will give you an edge over the competition. So tell me how it goes when you get that great remote job. And meanwhile, I wish you great success on your job hunt. Karen Warner-Schuler is the author of The Sudden Caregiver, a roadmap for resilient caregiving. Karen became a sudden caregiver when her late husband was diagnosed out of the blue with stage 4 cancer. After caring for him until his death in 2016, she decided to create a roadmap for caregivers, basically a playbook that gives a rational approach for helping caregivers build resilience. In addition to her work on caregiving, Karen is an executive coach and president of Tangible Group, a coaching and consulting firm that focuses on leadership development and career caregiver well-being. So soon after relocating to Philadelphia, she received her master's degree in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Karen currently lives in Beaufort, South Carolina, with her husband John and Fenway, their dog. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. This is a topic that is of interest to me and, of course, many other people like ourselves.
Sunita, thank you so much for having me here to talk about anything I can that will help change the caregiver story from one of depletion and distress to one of well-being.
Absolutely. You're speaking to the choir over here. So people who have become new caregivers overnight generally ask you for assistance. So what are the top 3 things that you tell them?
The first thing I tell them is get your stuff together. So there's paperwork, there's practical things. When I became a sudden caregiver, I'm not the most organized person. And so I was so afraid at a time of life and death that I would lose a piece of paper or a phone number, email address from someone who was critical for me to reach out to. So the first thing I did was honestly, I was just buying medication at the CVS on that first day, and I looked to the side and there was a big binder, and I just grabbed it, and that became the Bible for everything that needed to be shared about that caregiving experience. And we kept it by the front door, and everything that we needed to know, whether it was prescriptions, descriptions of treatment, people give you business cards as you go through the treatment process. I grabbed those. And also things like financial plans that need to be communicated with a lot of different people, insurance companies, Medicare, things like that. So the first thing is get that Bible, that binder, however you organize yourself, get that in place. One of my people that I work with has a shoebox, and everything just goes into the shoebox. So it doesn't have to be too fancy. The second thing is to really understand that, and I think I was listening to one of your previous Caregiver podcasts, and someone was talking about the need to not go it alone. And that is, to me, the most critical thing, is to create I call it the care leading squad in my book. And what that is it's a cheerleading squad just for you as the caregiver. It doesn't necessarily have to be a group of people who your person in your care needs around them. That's a whole different thing. But what I say is identify those tasks that you really need to have done. And maybe you want to do them and you don't have the time, or you're not good at them. And you have people in your world who are. One of the things that you're a caregiver, I know, and one of the things that happens where the people who love us want to help is they'll say to us, what can I do? And that, to me, over time just became one more job I had to do for someone else who wasn't in my care. So what I had was a list of things, and if I needed the front walk shoveled, I would I lined up a group of people who I knew would show up if I needed those things before I needed them. And the last piece of putting your care leading squad together is, and it's going to sound selfish because you're in a selfless position, but be selfish when you put your team together. You don't want anybody on that team who you have to apologize for, who you don't want to see literally your dirty laundry. These need to be people who can come and go in your presence, and you don't have to feel like you have to apologize or edit yourself in any way. And the third thing, which is really the simplest thing, but has a great deal of research behind it and great power behind it, is to exercise gratitude every day. So I literally have had and do still have just a notebook, and I write down at the end of every day 2 or 3 things, even tiny, tiny things that came my way, I didn't have to work for, and I was grateful for, or people. So someone would knock at my door, and I would open the door, and one of my daughter's friends from high school would put my order of Starbucks through the door, let me grab it, and then she would go on. I don't need to talk. I don't need to be entertained. I'm just here to help. So there are many times when people or things that happened got my gratitude. And the good thing about looking for gratitude at the end of the day is you automatically start seeing it. You internalize that habit, and you'll see it as you go through your day.
Wow. As coaches, the gratitude journal is always a tool to use, but I honestly never thought about using it as a caregiver.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I found most helpful for managing my own brain, because as you know, caregiving it lasts as long as it lasts, and all I wanted was for it to last forever. I wanted it to go as long as possible, but every single day I would open my eyes and think, this is still going on. This is still required of me. So it's very easy, first of all, if you're isolated and alone, or if you're just overwhelmed, there's too much to do and too little time to do it. It's easy to become depleted. And yet what we know from the research is that caregivers are actually in a job that can reinforce positive emotions, like things that make you proud or make you happy, or you go, wow, I didn't know I could drive through a blizzard with this person in my care and get there and get back. I'm really proud of myself for doing those things.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful.
And you mentioned the binder. I am an organized person, so it's funny because when I saw that in your books, like, oh, I have binders. Because I have a binder that I have specifically for his medicine stuff, the important papers, important bills, and then I have a binder that's for the care, the home care people that come in. Just little things, like it could be as simple as making sure he has water, how to operate the TV remote.
Yes,
or the kitchen by the door.
Yes,
the extra key is to the house, and the trash in the hallway. Little things like that.
Yeah, I use my phone also a lot, so I would take photos. So the medications change in pretty rapidly, and one minute it's a yellow pill, 1 minute it's a red pill. They do kind of the same thing. So I take pictures of them and put that in the binder, in case a family member was sitting in for me and needed to give the doses and were confused about that. And I also took pictures of the outsides of the bottles of the meds and took that. It was always on my phone. So if we ended up in the ER, which, as you know, happens frequently, and someone says, what are the medications? I don't have my list with me, although sometimes I have my binder. But I could just scroll through my phone and say, these are the latest ones, these are the doses.
Yeah, and then, of course, other tips such as having a bag of the overnight things you might need for the hospital near the door, in the closet near the door.
Yes, yeah, with healthy snacks in that bag. So raisins or granola bars, not necessarily, fast food stuff that you are going to not care for yourself.
So when your ex-husband was diagnosed with cancer, and you're at the hospital, that basically your entire life is going to change, what would be the common first thing that a caregiver has to do, in your opinion?
Well, for us, the first thing I had to do was accept that it's psychological acceptance, right? So we're getting this diagnosis, and it's basically your husband has a year to live. He did live a little longer than that, but that was it's a wave that just overcomes you. And I didn't believe it. That was my first thing of, no, this isn't true. This is a mistake. And I'm a professional problem solver, so I'm going to get in there and solve it. So that took about 24 hours for me to say, okay, this is happening. And now that problem solving really has to be on accepting it. And then what do we do? And for us, and this is actually 59% of people 50 and older do not have their paperwork in order, your wills, your finances. We had to pay our taxes. And my husband is literally just getting this diagnosis and saying, go home, get the checkbook, write these checks, and pay the taxes to our accountant. So it's the things that we take for granted. Oh, I'll just find that, and when I need it. But it was a little work to pull together. What are we going to live on while we go through this, and who are the people that we need to reach out to, and where are their phone numbers or email addresses, those kinds of things. So you're hearing me say getting organized, because you sound quite organized, but when the crisis hits, that's the last time you want to have a conversation about, well, how much money do we really have, and when are we supposed to retire, and that kind of thing.
So do you think we should have a pre-planning folder? I don't know. That was one of the things I thought about with your book. It was like, gosh, why aren't we teaching this in school? How can we better prepare each other? Because every time I speak to someone, they're overwhelmed. There's usually one sibling that has to go out of town and pack up the parent's house and get rid of stuff. It's like extremely overwhelming, and it's not generally a collective assistance, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're so right. I live now, my husband passed away in 2016, but I live every single day with the thought in mind that my daughter, who's in her 30s and has her own family, is going to, if something happens to me, she's going to have to deal with this and that. And so I want to keep it as neat and clean and get rid of what I don't need to keep as possible. And it's an entropic state, right? Like every time the mail comes in, you get more paper in the house. And to really be disciplined with, and I do have that filter of, I have china that belonged to my grandmother. My daughter is not going to want the china. How long do I, keep it? And I know those are small examples, but multiply that by every aspect of your life.
I have china now down in storage that from my dad's house. I'm still getting rid of stuff. It's 2 years trying to get rid of stuff bit by bit as I go along. And it's even when my mom passed, I think I had 4 or 5 yard sales, and I gave away a lot of stuff. And then when my dad got sick, I couldn't believe that there was still a lot of stuff. I literally rented a dumpster after getting rid of a lot of stuff and just started tossing stuff in there because I had to get on the plane and get back.
Yeah. And I will say your question and your point is to get ahead of it before you're in the emergency situation. When my late husband passed away, in the first year of widowhood, the last thing I wanted to do was throw his clothes away. So I lived with them, and even now it's hard to do. So it is good to have that conversation with yourself as a responsible member of your family. What stays, what goes.
Yeah. And you can I guess you could also look at it that if you give it away to I give away to Goodwill or whatever, but I like to find a church sometimes too that will just give it to someone for free. So you're blessing someone that's homeless or maybe someone that's trying to re-enter the workforce and they need a nice suit. So
absolutely,
look at it that way as well.
There are so many ways to distribute. After I finally got to that place where I had a friend come in and help me go through my husband's things, and she said, there's an organization in my church, and they're sending clothes to Nigeria to, this other church, and so I got a letter from her months later saying, your coffee maker is in my son's house. He's just starting out. Your husband's suits are in Nigeria helping people get jobs. Your bedding is helping homeless people in this shelter. So even office supplies, there are places to just give things. And for us, we moved a lot, and every time I moved, I would just ask the young people in my life who were just starting out, friends of my daughter's mostly, like, do you need a couch? I don't need the money. I need to move on and relocate things. So
yeah. So what would you like to see that would change? Would it be in the caregiver's mindset or mindsets as a whole? What would you like to see change?
Well, the word mindset is a really good place to start, because when you get a really bad medical diagnosis, it's like we were told, your husband, well, maybe if you are really, really lucky, he'll be here in 3 years, but odds are it'll be a year. I needed that information. I needed to take that and internalize it. I didn't force it on my husband. But what I think the best way to approach that kind of thing is just to really look at what is going on around you and how can you rationalize what has to happen next.
So how do you assist a caregiver? A sudden caregiver comes to you. How would you assist that person?
Well, for the first thing is go through the practical stuff, but the next thing would be to really take that growth mindset, really look at, so we have a bad diagnosis, how can we flip that and say, a friend of mine who had just lost his partner when we got this diagnosis, I was speaking to him and he said, Karen, he's here now. So that's how we got through that idea of reframing, looking at what's positive about this. In my book, I have a roadmap which goes from, it spells the acronym CARE, but it goes from crisis to as normal as possible, to resolution, and then evolution. That crisis and as normal as possible, that's really your opportunity to reframe. So yes, you're in crisis, but you're not going to stay in crisis. Things will stabilize. And when you get to as normal as possible as a caregiver, you double down on that. It won't be what normal was before the diagnosis, and it won't be anyone else's definition of normal, but it will be for you in this caregiving situation, what is as normal as possible.
Yeah. And I think possibly we need to recognize that it is a stage of life that some people are too shocked by it. It is a natural stage of life. You know what I mean? Just like youth, middle age.
It is. And death is a natural stage of life if you get right down to it. So you're in a situation where this is, you're alive, the other person is alive, and how can you kind of look at what's really great? There's a concept in positive psychology called PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. And what you want to do as a caregiver is to find as many of those 5 aspects in your life as possible. So the P stands for positive emotions. So anything you can do to make yourself proud, to look at the person in your care and say, you know, I really love this person. I'm so glad I'm here. Instead of, oh, I have to do this, I'm so glad I'm here to be able to do it. Then the E stands, so positive emotions, the E stands for engagement. It is, as you know, it is a fully engaging occupation to be a caregiver, even when you're not on the scene. The R stands for relationships, so positive relationships. And the research about lived experiences of caregivers say they feel closer to the person in their care. There was one caregiver I spoke with, her father had Alzheimer's. He wasn't as social. He became a different personality and not as social, but the thing that he began to talk about was his experience in the war. And she had never heard his war stories, and neither had her kids. And so everyone started wanting to go and help him because he would share these stories that were just amazing. And that was an experience that may never have happened had he not gotten that diagnosis and become ill. And then M in the word PERMA is for meaning and accomplishment. Can you look back on a day or a year or a week and say, wow, this, you know, I've had caregivers say, my parents, one caregiver was taking care of both her parents at the same time. They were both elderly and frail. And she just would say, I don't have any talents. I can't sing. I'm not an artist, but I can do this. I really love caring for my parents. And this is what God put me on this earth to do. Mm-hmm. And the A in the word PERMA is really accomplishment and achievement. So can you find those places where you can, even if no one else recognizes it, you can look at small wins or small accomplishments over the course of your day and just give the little pat on the back, like, oh, I did that. Didn't think I could.
I love that. How would a potential caregiver client reach you?
Well, I have a website called thesuddencaregiver.com. And by the way, there are a lot of resources. There's a tab of resources out there. We keep it up to date as much as possible. But one thing I find that caregivers need is to know that there are more resources out there than they may be aware of. And then my email address is my 3 initials, KWS, as in Sam, as in Schuler, at thesuddencaregiver.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of needed tips from your book.
Thank you. Good luck. And remember well-being. Stay resilient.
I will. I get my massages. It helps me a lot. And my dog helps.
So good. So good.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
Thank you. You too.